Welcome to season number 8 of Debt Free in 30. Let's get started.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
This is episode number 366 of Debt Free in 30, and since the show started 7 years ago, I've had one goal: to give you, the listener, practical advice on how to manage your money and get out of debt. Since March of 2020, when the lockdown started, we focused a lot on the financial impact of the pandemic and what you needed to do to protect yourself in these uncertain times. I don't know exactly what we'll talk about this season. Will COVID dominate the news cycle for another year, or will it become less of an issue? I don't know, but here's what I do know. The impact of the events of the last 17 months will be felt for years to come. If you owned a home in the suburbs at the start of the pandemic, and if you were able to work from home during the lockdowns, well, your financial situation likely improved over the last year and a half. Your house went up in value, you saved money by not driving to work and paying for gas and parking and lunches out, and you couldn't go on an expensive vacation, so you may have more cash now than you did in the before time. But if you didn't own a home, and if you worked in the service industry and lost your job and had to use debt to survive, you are a lot worse off. When will you recover? When will your job ever come back? And that's the thing about recent events. The pandemic did not impact everyone the same. There's no doubt that the rich got richer. Jeff Bezos at Amazon made so much money he was able to build a rocket and go to space. Good for him, but not as great for the rest of us. So what's the plan for season number 8? In these difficult times, I want to focus even more on practical advice. At some point in the next few weeks, my company, Ted Michalos and Associates, will be releasing our first ever Straight Talk on Personal Finance course. It's on credit repair and credit rebuilding, which is a topic most of my clients ask me about, and it was filmed right here in this studio on the main floor of our head office here in Kitchener. We'll announce when it's released to our newsletter subscribers. It's free, so go to hoyes.com and type in newsletter in the search box, and you can subscribe now so you know when it's released. Why did we create this course? Well, for the same reason I created this podcast. There is a shortage of good, practical financial information, and I want to do my part to get the word out that there are options to deal with debt. You may say, but wait, there's no shortage of information. The internet is full of it. Yeah, I agree. The internet is full of it, all right, and that's the problem. There is a lot of information, but is it reliable? Is it accurate? The problem is that everyone is selling something. The bank doesn't want you to pay off your debt because if everyone did that, well, they'd be out of business. They sell debt. The payday loan companies don't want to give you products to help you manage your money. They want you to keep borrowing forever. Some financial planners are great, but a lot of them aren't really financial planners. They're salespeople trying to sell you their high-cost mutual funds. Now, of course, I'm no different. I also have something to sell. My company, Ted Michalos, sells 2 services: proposals and bankruptcies. That's it. We don't do loans or mortgages or sell investments or give tax advice. So when you listen to this podcast, how do you know I'm not just trying to sell you something? Well, the answer is you don't. Just like with every other podcast or radio show or commercial, you have to listen and think and decide for yourself whether or not the advice applies to you. There's another reason I do this podcast. The first episode aired September 6, 2014, and it was 22 minutes, and I find that pretty constraining, so I pulled it off the radio, made it an audio-only podcast, and, well, we started filming it in season number 5, put it on YouTube as a video podcast, as well as continuing the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other podcasting app. The first few shows were a bit rough, but we gradually built this studio, put the fancy soundproof stuff on the walls, installed proper lighting, got good microphones, and well, here we are. So why have a studio and fancy lighting? Well, because we get our information by listening and watching, and a big source of information is the traditional news media filmed in a fancy studio. We all grew up listening to radio newscasts, and we, or our parents, watched the evening news to find out what's going on. But traditional media is limited. The newscast covers the big stories, but each story is only 2 or 3 minutes long, so it's hard to go into depth in 3 minutes. I know, I've been interviewed on TV and radio hundreds of times. For a typical TV newscast, they'll interview me for 5 or 10 minutes, and they'll pick a clip of me talking for 10 or 12 seconds, and that's what's on the news. 12 seconds. I'm a good talker, but there's not much I can tell you in 12 seconds. Talk radio is a bit better because a segment on a talk show might be 10 or 20 minutes, but even then, the host has questions they want to ask. Then just as we get into it, we have to stop for a commercial or the news or the traffic or whatever. So again, it's hard to have an in-depth conversation on a traditional TV or radio program. And of course, with print media, well, like newspapers, it's even more difficult because space is limited, so the reporter decides what quotes get used and what gets reported. It's the constraints of traditional media that have led to the explosion of long-form podcasts. Statistics show that nearly 11 million Canadians listened to a podcast in the last month, and the numbers continue to increase. I assume you're listening to this podcast right now because there are no time constraints. The podcast ends when we're done, not when it's time to break for a commercial. Even better, you, the listener, are in complete control. You can pause the show or stop whenever you want. I personally often watch YouTube videos and listen to podcasts at 1.5 times speed because I can listen to more podcasts that way. It's great, I'm in control. So, what's the plan for this year? I'll continue to have special guests, but the emphasis this year will be on practical advice. So that means you'll see a lot of our regular contributors like Ted Michalos, Terrio and Diane Cunha. Based on the feedback I get, these are the shows you like the best, so I'm going to give you what you want. I continue to upgrade our technology, so I also plan to do some roundtable discussions this year with more than one guest, so we can get multiple perspectives on the show and pack even more practical information into each Debt-Free in 30 episode. It all starts next week when Ted Michalos and I will kick off the new season with a look ahead to the fall. How will the results of the federal election impact your finances? Does it even matter who wins? We've got some definite thoughts on that and lots of practical tips, so you'll want to tune in for that show. And finally, thanks to everyone who has subscribed to the Debt-Free in 30 channel on YouTube. I appreciate it. It really helps to get the word out. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and please hit the notification bell, hit the like button, and feel free to leave a comment. Most of our listeners listen to the audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcasting app. So again, please subscribe, leave a review, and thanks for listening. That's what I've got planned for season number 8. Hit me up on Twitter at Doug Hoyes if you have any comments or suggestions. Until next week when Ted returns, that's our show for today. Thanks for listening and watching. See you next week. That was the season premiere of season number 8 of Debt-Free in 30.